Well, as I said a few days ago, a bail agent was shot here in Wichita, and I saw my next two in-studio guests here being interviewed on TV, and that is Stephen Owens, who's the president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. Stephen, good evening.
Hey, thank you very much, Gene, for having us on.
Nice to have you here. And Chris Fisher, vice president of the same organization, the Kansas Bail Agents Association.
Great to be here.
Nice to have you. And I got some questions here that are really elementary because, even though I've seen like 100 episodes of Law and Order, and so I think that qualifies me for some sort of a certificate, I think. And I've seen the Clint Eastwood movies and a lot of the old Western movies that had bounty hunters in them and so forth. Maybe I don't quite understand what it is. So why don't we just jump right in at the beginning? So what is a bail agent?
Well, let's start by hopefully dispelling some of those rumors, because as we know, everything we see on TV is not reality.
Darn.
A bondsman performs a very basic function. We not only assure justice, we ensure justice. We do so by posting a bond on an individual that has been charged with a crime. Now, it could be anything from a small, low-level misdemeanor all the way up to a felony. The judge ultimately decides what that person's value is to the court. Okay, and so as bondsman, if we have a basic DUI, for example, might be a $2,500 bond, the bondsman then steps in and charges $250 to put up that $2,500 in the event that the defendant fails to appear in court. Basically, in a nutshell, our job is to make sure that they are at each and every appearance during the entire duration of their bond. Some people think that we're only liable up until that first appearance. That's not the case. We're on that bond throughout the entire process until that case is officially closed.
So if I get into the DUI or whatever, and you say it's the $2,500, and I don't have the $2,500, is that right? And I need somebody to post the bond for me. That's where you might come in.
Absolutely. You always have the right to post the full amount of that bond on deposit with the jail, but oftentimes many people don't have that kind of money.
And then you charge, is it a flat $250 or is it 10%?
It's 10%. 10% generally what we charge.
And so you add that on to the bail, or do I have to pay that?
You never have to pay the $2,500. Okay, consider it like a loan at the bank. Okay, you go in, you borrow $2,500. They're going to charge you $250 in interest. At the bank, you have to pay them the $2,500. You pay us back that $2,500 by making each and every appearance. Because once all of your appearances are made and that case is closed, we no longer have that liability, and neither do you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so but then I don't make that appearance and I disappear out there. Then do you have to pay the court?
Yes, we actually, if it's a district court case, we have 60 days. And here in the city of Wichita, we have 60 days from the date that we are served notice that the defendant failed to appear to either arrest them and return them to custody or pay the entire amount of that bond.
Mm-hmm. And so then, but if you can't find the person, why then you would forfeit the bond. Is that what's happening?
That is exactly what happens. The court orders that forfeit.
But then the clock is running on this person, I guess, and you can go out and find him.
Absolutely. That becomes our primary objective at that point, because obviously we don't want to pay that $2,500 in that situation.
So does the statute of limitations go out the window then? I mean, does that person, say, has skipped out on the bail, then you can find him. You can take as long as you want?
Well, we have 60 days. 60 days before it's paid. After we pay that bond on day 61, then there's no financial incentive for us to look for him anymore.
Oh, really? You got to get him within 60 days?
That's it. 60 days. That's how long we have.
See, that's news to me. All right. We're talking about the Kansas Bail Agents Association with Stephen Owens. He's president of the organization, and Chris Fisher, he's the vice president. You got a question or a comment you want to get in on the discussion here? 436-1330 is a telephone number, and a good fair amount of our audience, I believe, is either felons or will be at some time in the future. Although I haven't been. Okay, so then what's a bounty hunter?
Well, basically, a bounty hunter is someone that a bail bondsman hires on their behalf to apprehend a defendant. In Wichita, typically, a lot of bail agents do their own bounty hunting work as licensed bail agents. Right now, there's not very many laws governing just bounty hunters. You can basically hire somebody on your behalf that says they're a bounty hunter to go apprehend somebody for you.
But he has to do that within the 60 days?
Exactly. Once we get that letter or notification from the court that person misses court, then the clock's running. We spend all of our hours and time and resources in getting that person back into custody.
Well, that's not a lot of time, it doesn't seem to be like, because if a person goes to Mexico or wherever, it's gone, isn't he?
Well, Gene, ironically, we just changed it about 2 years ago from 10 days.
Oh,
so we went from 10 days to 60 days, which is actually still the low end of the states around Kansas. Many of the states give 180 days. Some actually give 365 days. Mm-hmm. We're on the lower end of that, but we're grateful to have the 60 over the 10.
Well, this can't be now for very serious crimes, right? I mean, if someone posts a bond, of course, I guess they don't let people out on murder, do they, or do they?
Sometimes it depends on the circumstances. It's always up to the judicial discretion. Sometimes we've heard of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million bonds. The reality is, unless you're some pop singer with millions to spend, most people don't post those kind of bonds just because they're so large.
We do quite a bit of bonds on aggravated batteries and high level person felonies, and typically those end up being actually safer bonds, and the people fail to appear less than they do on misdemeanor cases.
So what's a typical bail that you would be asked to post in this part of the country?
It varies. Truly, it varies based on the crime. Your lower level misdemeanors, even if there's 3 or 4 misdemeanors, it still may be only a $2,000 to a $5,000 bond. When you get into some of your felonies, oftentimes are $5,000, $10,000. Your aggravated battery, assault bond might run about $50,000. Sometimes they're up $100,000, $250,000 based on the severity of the crime, based on how important ultimately they are to the court and the threat to society that they are.
Well, don't you have to think pretty long and hard before you put up a $250,000 bail?
We think long and hard and make sure that we have protections in place to assure that defendant is going to make his court appearances. And sometimes take it a step further with monitoring devices, for example, that Chris uses, and various other ways to secure our interest in that individual.
So what do you think happened to this, or what maybe that happened to this bail agent that was shot here in Wichita? Was he was not local, right? Or was he?
Well, he was, I believe, a local bounty hunter. To my knowledge, there was not an actual licensed bail agent at the location when they were trying to make the arrest. Again, I wasn't there, so I'm speaking off of things that I've heard after the fact, but I believe that they were local bounty hunters that were hired by a bail agent to apprehend someone, and I think what happened, to my knowledge, the defendant was not actually at the address, but they were trying to gain information to apprehend the defendant, and things got a little heated and out of control pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, well, again, I get most of my information from Hollywood, and we know that can sometimes be, not often, of course, but sometimes that can be exaggerated. But do bounty hunters have a kind of carte blanche to be able to go get somebody? That maybe even more than a law enforcement agent has?
We do to some extent. If it is a defendant that is on our bond, then we do. And in that situation, we actually have a little bit more authority than law enforcement does. We don't have to have a search warrant to enter a residence where we absolutely know the defendant is. If we're 100% certain we're there and we have to force entry, then that is within our rights to do that. Obviously, we try to minimize those occasions and do what we can to keep things from getting heated, because those very rarely end in a positive situation where we're really accomplishing anything.
So then do you actually arrest people?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes, sir.
For the bond that we have them out on, for the warrant on that case, we do arrest people and return them to the custody of whatever judicial district, whatever county jail we bond them out.
And you have to go through the Miranda eyes business and all that. You just take them into custody, right?
That's correct, because the circumstances are different. The circumstances are different on one of our bonds, as they have signed contracts with us, allowing us to do the things necessary to return them into custody. For example, credit checks, background checks. We can do certain things that don't fall within the scope of law enforcement, yet at the same time, we are an arm of law enforcement in that we do effect arrests.
So what about out of state? If you have the extradition and so forth, you don't have to worry about that?
We have to be very careful and really study the laws in other states before we go to another state to apprehend people. There are some states that don't recognize out-of-state bounty hunters, or you have to have a local agent with you present when you arrest somebody.
All right, we're talking about bounties and bounty hunters and so forth, and we got a couple of people that know what they're talking about. Stephen Owens, he's the president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. Chris Fisher is the vice president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. We need to take a break here. Everybody knows about Dog the Bounty Hunter, right? He's on TV.
Yeah.
And he got himself in a jam in Mexico, didn't he, over grabbing this Max Factor error that had skipped out on some big bomb. We'll talk about that and a whole bunch of other things. 436-1330. We have the Alan that's holding on the line. We're talking about something else right now, Alan. If you want to hang on, well, it's fine to hang on, but and we'll try to get you later. If you have any questions or comments, I want to direct to our in-studio guest for this hour, 436-1330. Back after this. All right, welcome back. Hi, Gene Countryman here. This is the Gene Countryman radio program. We're on KNSS up until 8 p.m. When our friend John Batchelor will be coming down the line with his very fine show. Our special in-studio guest, Stephen Owens, president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and Chris Fisher, vice president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. We're talking about what they do and who they are and how they're different from bounty hunters. Just before we went to the break, guys, we talked about this Dog, the bounty hunter, who's on TV or was, so forth. And we were talking about here off the air that a lot of times, or most of the times, it's pretty routine to get somebody back.
It is. Very seldom do we have issues when we have to arrest a defendant. Most of the time, once they're caught, once you find their location, once you knock on their door, and they know they're caught, they come without incident.
What excuse do they use for not showing up?
Usually they forgot. And most of the time they were actually planning on showing up the next day and taking care of this.
They were.
Oh yeah.
And you believe that?
No.
A lot of the time.
The thing to remember about Dog the Bounty Hunter is ultimately it is television. And so they have to keep it dramatic. They have to keep it exciting. And if they don't, they lose viewers. And just like Chris said, the reality is it's not like that. As a general rule, we work with local law enforcement. They want the fugitive off the street just as much as we do. And so we're out there, we're touching base with them, getting information, doing everything we can to affect the arrest that we need to without any kind of incident, and obviously return home to our families at the end of the evening as well.
If somebody wants to be a bounty hunter and you're physically able and you want to do it, what kind of money can they make? What do you have, unless you do it yourself, what do you pay somebody to do this?
Well, in Wichita, it's a pretty tough gig because most of the bail agents do their own bounty hunting work for liability issues. They just feel safer having the guys in their own office handle their business. But typically, a bounty hunter can charge 10% of the bail to apprehend somebody if that's what it takes. I don't use outside bounty hunters, but if I needed to, it would usually be on an out-of-state basis if I had somebody that was in another state.
So as a bounty hunter, they don't have to get the police in the action, right? They can just go take the person.
Legally, they should. There is a law right now that they are supposed to notify the local police when they're going out on a pickup and call 911 and let them know the address they're going to and what their plans are. They should notify them, and then it's up to the local authorities if they want to come and assist us.
If
there's an
involved.
issue. Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit here, just a moment. What's the history of the bail agents and the bounty hunters in this country? Is it and are we unique around the world in this?
We kind of are. Bail bonding started back in the 1600s in England. Just like we were talking about off the air about where the term sheriff started and things like that, because back in those days it was the sheriff that was able to set bail. And as that progressed, it moved obviously over to our country, and commercial bail thrived because of its effectiveness in our judicial system. Because the beautiful thing about bail bonding is it is not a taxpayer-funded system. Bail bonding is all privately funded, and so there are no taxpayer dollars going to ensuring that these defendants are held accountable for the crimes that they're charged with. Not only that, but it actually saves taxpayer dollars because they're not taking up a bed in the jail waiting to have their day in court.
I'm still hung up a little bit on this 60-day deal because I'm really surprised to hear about that. So let's say that this person that Bill called about here, he was gone, he escaped again, and that he runs the clock out for the 60 days, not Bill, the guy who was living in the apartment. And he runs the clock out, so the bondsman loses the bail. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
But isn't that person still wanted?
Absolutely, and therein lies the difference between something we'll probably talk about a little bit later, owner cognizance bonds versus having a bond posted by surety. The surety is ultimately out the money, so it's going into the system. And once we pay that money, there is still a warrant. The problem is, oftentimes we're seeing in this era of budget cuts and decreased income, law enforcement budgets getting cut. And when law enforcement budgets get cut, they simply don't have the necessary funding to go out and search for these warrants. Whereas the bondsmen obviously are going to be out a tremendous amount of money based on the circumstances and go out there to make this job happen, to make this happen.
So even after the 60 days is up, let's say, and let's say there was a high bond here, let's say it was $250,000 for to talk about, and the 60 days ran out, wouldn't it still be in the bondsman's interest to get a bounty hunter to get this person back or not?
No, because currently in state law, which again is something that we hope to change here in the future, currently in state law there's no remedy for that. We can't 30 days after that 60 is up, if we find this defendant and take him back to court, there's no law stating that we're going to get any of our money back. I'll use Oklahoma for an example. In Oklahoma, you have 90 days to locate a defendant. On the 91st day, you pay the bond. Then you have an additional 90 days to apprehend the defendant and get your money back. Okay, different circumstances, different amount of time. They're still receiving their money on time, but then there's still incentive for that bondsman to continue to do their work.
There's no reward put on somebody that skips bail,
right? So, and unless a reward is put on them by the bonding company. But once the bond's forfeited and we pay the bond, it could be argued that we don't have the authority to arrest them anymore.
All right, got to take a quick break for the news. Our special in-studio guest here is Stephen Owens, president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. Chris Fisher, he's the VP of the Kansas Bail Agents Association. 436-1330 is our telephone number. To be here for, about another 20 minutes or so after the news. If you got a question or a comment to get in here, we got a lot more ground to cover because I got some questions here, man. Because all I know about this, and I suspect most of the listeners know, is what we see on TV and in the movies, and so we're finding out it's not exactly that way, aren't we? All right, 436-1330, back after the news. Hi, welcome back. Gene Countryman here. Now we're going down to the short rows. We got about 25 minutes left of the Gene Countryman radio show. In studio guest Stephen Owens, president of the Kansas Bail Agent Association, and Chris Fisher. What's the profile of a typical person that's going to jump bail? I mean, is there a person? I mean, is it? I suspect it's a man, right?
I tell you what, I've had females 21 years old miss court. I've had housewives miss court. I've had 70-year-old men miss court. Just when I think I've got it figured out,
intentionally miss court.
There's no such thing as a safe bond. You just never know who's going to decide not to go to court. And a lot of times it's outside influences that they're listening to. They think there's some reason next time they go to court that the judge is just going to throw them in jail, and they're afraid of what might happen, so they decide to just put it off a little while.
Well, you guys are sort of downplaying the action part of this, but you've had some excitement over your years, right, of trying to get somebody, tried to get away from you, like Bill called and the guy ran out the back door or whatever he did.
Definitely. There are instances where we have some hairy situations, and you have to use a little bit of force sometimes, and you have to defend yourself to get somebody into custody.
You go out by yourself or with somebody?
We never go by ourselves. Just like Bill was alluding to, that the guy got out the back door. We make sure that we take enough people, and that ensures our safety as well as the safety of others. And we have all the exits usually covered, so we don't want to do all that work to find them, which is usually what most of the work is. And then once you find them, they get away from you.
And then let them get away.
Exactly.
Is there so what crime is most likely, or is there any statistics on who's most likely to jump bail? A DUI or?
I don't think that there's no way to stereotype it. There's no statistic
all
out
over
there.
The place.
It really is. You just never can tell Just like Chris, we've had we chased an 82-year-old lady down to North Texas one time. I mean, and it was a little bitty bond that she would have got a slap on the wrist for, but somebody along the way convinced her she was going to jail for the rest of her life.
I will tell you this. A lot of people that we get out for drug charges, those are probably the ones that are most likely to miss court, because when they are at that point where they're strung out on some type of drug, they definitely are not thinking clearly. So they are more likely to be a threat to miss court, typically.
436-1330 is the telephone number. Got to take a quick break here again, and then we'll be back and wrap this all up. And then you guys want to talk about some changes that you'd like to make, to what is a bounty hunter and who can be in your business and so forth. So we get into that. Anything else you want to talk about before we get to the break?
We're just having a great time.
Yeah, we are.
Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, welcome back. Now, the final segment of the Gene Countryman radio program. Mark Levin, who was going to be on the program this week, they put him off on me at the last moment, and so perhaps we'll get him next week or the week following, but we're going to get him anyway, talk about his new book, Meritopia. Our special in-studio guest this last hour is Stephen Owens, president of the KNSS Agents Association, and Chris Fisher. He's a VP with the same the outfit. So, guys, you want to we've talked a little bit about how easy it is or how easy it has been in Kansas to be a bail bondsman or a bail agent, and you want to tighten this up a little bit?
Yeah, we think it's important. I'm not a fan of government regulation, never have been, but there comes a point in an industry such as this that there's a stereotype out there, and it's time for that stereotype to change. It's time for laws throughout the state to be standardized, and we hope as our association continues to grow and we develop those relationships in Topeka to put forth a comprehensive overhaul bill, overhauling the bail bonding laws as well as the fugitive recovery laws in the state of Kansas. Currently, we have one bill, Senate Bill 321 out there, that deals primarily with OR bonds. And a lot of people don't understand what an OR bond is. An OR bond is when you're released on your own recognizance, instead of having to pay a bondsman to watch over you and make sure that you appear in court. The court ultimately decides that you're trustworthy enough that they're going to let you sign a piece of paper and you promise to appear in court. And what we're finding is those failure to appear rates excel dramatically in circumstances like that. And the problem is we're seeing that as a tool being used for jail overcrowding. One of the big issues that we see now with the tax burdens and so forth and so on is jail overcrowding. And so we're seeing a tremendous increase in the use of OR bonds. And it's time to put some parameters on that. For example, very simple things like you can't have a previous history of failing to appear in court. If you fail to appear in court, why should you be released on an OR bond and be responsible yourself to come back to court?
To come back to court.
So, yeah, and then changing some of the bounty hunter laws as well, minimally.
We're running out of time here, but Brock's on the line. Brock, good evening on the Gene Countryman Show.
Yeah, I was calling to see, I was really interested in it. Is there any classes or schools or anything a guy can sign up for to get put on, to learn about it?
There you go.
Actually, go to our website, KNSSBailAgentAssociation.com. And we do have our next set of classes, I believe, is March 3rd and March 4th. And that is very good for any bounty hunters or bail agents that are even already bail agents. There's going to be some great information and teaching going on in that class.
So Wesley, if he's still out there, he might be interested in that, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, we call it the Bail Agents Training Course. It's a training course put on by one of our founding members of the association, Bob Schofield, and he offers that course twice a year, and it's fantastic. He mixes it up really well and is very, very informative and the only one of its kind.
Okay, Brock, you can also get that website by GeneCountryman.com and click on their logo on my website under today's date and take you right there. Anything else, Brock?
Nope, that'll do it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. A couple minutes left here, guys. What do you want to talk about that we haven't talked about here?
Well, I think one of the good things to talk about are the differences between, the types of bondsmen that there are out there. I know for myself, I've been associated with AIA Surety out of Calabasas, California for a number of years, member of the ExpertBail Network. of agents, which is a network of agents throughout the country that hold themselves to a professional standard, and we're represented by an insurance company that guarantees in the event that we have that forfeiture and we don't pay it as bondsmen, they take care of it. Mm-hmm. Chris Fisher, on the other hand, can speak to his way of business.
Yeah. What's the highest profile case you've had without naming names, but the one that just
I've had some pretty high profile cases here locally, some manslaughter cases, quite a bit of cases involving aggravated batteries and a lot of stuff that you do see on the news.
You've had some repeat business, you said, right?
Oh, yeah. I've got my regulars that they might break the law quite a bit, but with their word is pretty good, and when they call me, I come running.
The Muse Fat Lady's getting ready to sing here. Anything to wrap this up real quick, guys?
Gene, thank you very much. Our condolences to the family of that bounty hunter that was shot. We want them to know that on behalf of the KBAA. Anybody interested in being in the business or taking training, be sure and see the website, KansasBailAgentsAssociation.com.
Stephen Owens, President of the Bail Agents Association, Chris Fisher, Vice President of Bail Agents Association. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us. We had a great time.
I learned something. I hope the listeners did too.